Marcus Hale was not like most humans seen in the outer colonies of the galaxy. On a mining station orbiting a calm blue star, life was routine, almost peaceful, but it was also hard, unpredictable, and sometimes unforgiving. Humans were rare in this part of space, a species that many aliens considered fragile, emotional, and slow to react under pressure. Marcus, however, was quietly different. He moved with steady confidence, spoke only when necessary, and seemed to understand systems, machines, and people in ways that others often overlooked. On the surface, he appeared calm and unremarkable, blending in with the alien workers and engineers who filled the station's narrow corridors and humming control rooms. But beneath that quiet exterior, there was a human mind constantly observing, calculating, and enduring more than anyone around him could imagine. Life on the station was far from luxurious. The corridors hummed with the low vibrations of machinery, and the scent of recycled air mixed with the faint metallic thames of fuel and mineral dust. Aliens of many species worked here, each with different languages, gestures, and ways of thinking. Some had multiple limbs and could manipulate tools in ways humans could not. Others had delicate sensory organs and could detect flaws in systems before even a machine warned of a problem. Marcus often watched them carefully, not out of curiosity alone but to understand them, to predict how they would act, and to adapt so he could survive and thrive in a place where humans were considered weak, despite being underestimated. Marcus had a reputation for reliability. Whenever something broke, systems faltered, or complex repairs were needed, Marcus was the one quietly called in. The alien workers often treated him like a helper rather than an equal, assuming that humans could only handle simple tasks. They did not know that Marcus had learned every possible way to repair the station, to troubleshoot mechanical failures, and to manage crises, all from years of experience and stubborn persistence. They assumed patience meant passivity. They assumed quiet meant weakness. But patience, Marcus knew, was a weapon as sharp as any tool. Days on the station were long and repetitive. Marcus would wake to the soft hum of artificial lighting, make his way to the engineering bay, and begin inspecting the massive machinery that kept the station operational. Some of the engines were decades old, their cores prone to overheating if not carefully maintained. He worked with precision, checking readings, adjusting flow regulators, and recalibrating sensors, all while the aliens around him hurried, complained, or joked at his expense. Marcus endured their teasing silently. He had learned long ago that reacting to insults rarely solved anything, and that survival often required swallowing anger and focusing on the task at hand. Each day, he reminded himself that his calm demeanor was armored, a shield against the chaos and bias surrounding him. Despite his careful work, life on the station was not easy emotionally. Many of the aliens saw him as inferior, treating him with subtle disdain or outright mockery. They made jokes about human fragility, questioned his decisions in front of others, and sometimes even assigned him tasks designed to overwhelm him. Marcus felt the sting, but he learned to let it pass, storing the feelings somewhere deep inside. He had seen other humans lose their composure in similar situations, and he had watched how quickly situations spiraled out of control when emotions ruled over logic. That would never be him, not yet. Marcus knew the value of endurance, of silent observation, and of understanding his opponent's weaknesses before making a move. He had learned that one day patience could turn into power, if wielded correctly. Among the alien workers, Marcus often felt like a ghost. He moved through the halls without drawing attention, repairing systems, helping where needed, and observing quietly. He noticed patterns in how the aliens interacted, who led, who followed, who thrived under pressure, and who crumbled. He studied the station as much as he studied the people on it. The engines had temperaments, the fuel systems had moods, and the machinery often behaved unpredictably if neglected. Marcus had learned to anticipate malfunctions, to detect subtle changes in energy flows, and to recognize when a system was near failure. To the aliens, this might seem like luck, but it was years of experience, sharp observation, and methodical patience. Marcus understood that mastery came from careful attention, from endurance, and from the willingness to continue even when no one noticed. Yet even with all his skills, Marcus lived with an invisible weight. Every day, he faced constant underestimation, subtle cruelty, and a sense that he was always on trial. The supervisors, in particular, seemed determined to see him fail. They gave him the most difficult assignments, timed his work to pressure him, and scrutinized every movement as if waiting for a human to break. Some of the alien workers whispered about how long a human could endure such treatment, assuming Marcus would eventually snap or make a mistake. But Marcus's mind worked differently. He did not let the judgment of others dictate his emotions. He had learned that endurance was power, that silence could conceal strength, and that calmness could disarm even the most confident adversaries. In the quiet moments, Marcus reflected on his life before the station. He remembered Earth's streets, the endless training, the physical and mental challenges that had shaped him. Humans had survived wars, disasters, and hardships that alien species could barely imagine. That history lived inside him, a reservoir of strength and resilience. He drew upon it silently, letting it guide his actions even when surrounded by alien mockery. Every system he repaired, every crisis he managed, and every insult he absorbed without reaction added to that internal reservoir, preparing him for moments that no one could predict. The aliens rarely understood Marcus, but some had begun to notice small things. The way he could predict failures before they happened, the way he could fix machinery that others deemed impossible, the way he moved calmly in emergencies while others panicked. These observations did not yet translate into respect. Most aliens still believed humans were fragile, slow, and weak. They saw Marcus as an exception, a quiet oddity rather than a human to be reckoned with. They did not realize that his calm exterior was not just personality, it was training, experience, and a conscious strategy to survive in a place that expected humans to fail. Yet for all his discipline, Marcus felt pressure mounting inside him. Each day, the alien supervisors pushed a little further, assigning dangerous tasks, spreading false blame, and testing the limits of his patience. Marcus did not explode or lash out. He smiled faintly, nodded, and continued his work, storing the frustration for moments when it could be used constructively. He understood that anger, when uncontrolled, was destructive, but he also understood that patience, when tested, could become unstoppable. Marcus was learning a dangerous truth.com. Humans were unpredictable, and the longer one endured, the more powerful one could become when the breaking point finally arrived. One morning, Marcus arrived to find a critical system malfunctioning. The station's life support flow was erratic, and the sensors were giving contradictory readings. The alien supervisors were too busy arguing among themselves to help. Marcus worked alone, methodically diagnosing the issue, tracing energy flows, and replacing damaged components. Sweat dripped from his brow, and his hands shook slightly from exhaustion, but he kept going. He had been here before, countless times, solving problems that others thought impossible. And yet, there was a flicker of something new in his mind, a quiet awareness that the patience he had relied upon for so long was being tested more than ever, and that the stress he carried was slowly building into something potent, something unavoidable. By the end of that long shift, the system was repaired. The station hummed steadily again. The supervisors, seeing the repairs, shrugged and took credit for overseeing the work. The alien workers congratulated Marcus politely but with faint skepticism, as if expecting him to falter eventually. Marcus said nothing. He returned to his quarters, cleaned his tools, and sat quietly. No one knew the thoughts racing in his mind, the frustration, the endurance, the simmering awareness that humans were not fragile, that patience could hide immense strength, and that eventually, circumstances could push even the calmest human to act in ways no one could predict. By the end of that day, Marcus Hale remained outwardly calm, almost invisible, blending with the background of the station. But inside, a spark had started, a quiet awareness that patience had limits, that endurance carried weight, and that humans, long underestimated, could be unstoppable when those limits were reached. The aliens did not notice it. They assumed he was like always quiet, patient, harmless. But Marcus knew differently. He understood something that none of the alien workers fully grasped. Calm humans were watching, learning, waiting, and when the right moment came, they could do things that made even the most confident alien pause, hesitate, or run. This was the quiet beginning of a story that no one aboard the station would forget, a story of endurance, patience, and the hidden power of a human who had learned to survive in a world that expected him to fail. Life on the station continued, but the calm that Marcus Hale had maintained for so long began to crack under pressure. Though he remained outwardly composed, the environment around him grew increasingly hostile. The alien supervisors, who had always underestimated him, seemed determined to push him to his limits. Each day brought new challenges, not just mechanical or technical, but emotional and social. They seemed to delight in testing his patience, assigning him tasks that were impossible to complete alone, or leaving him responsible for dangerous machinery that no one else wanted to touch. Marcus accepted the work quietly, methodically approaching each problem, but inside, tension was building. Every insult, every mockery, every deliberate obstruction they placed in his way was being recorded in his mind, stored for a time when patience might turn into something more potent. The alien workers around Marcus continued to treat him differently than one of their own. Many assumed that humans could not handle high-stress situations, and some even whispered about his fragility when he was out of earshot. Marcus had learned long ago not to respond to these remarks. He knew that arguments or confrontations rarely changed opinions. Instead, he focused on observation. He watched how the aliens coordinated their work, how they reacted to pressure, and how they relied on or ignored systems that could fail at any moment. By doing so, Marcus learned not just how the station worked, but also how every individual on it functioned under stress. This knowledge gave him an advantage, one that would become crucial in the days ahead. One particularly tense day, a fuel core malfunction occurred deep in the station's lower decks. This section was dangerous even for the most experienced engineers. The core was unstable, and a single misstep could lead to catastrophic explosions. Normally, such incidents would trigger immediate teamwork, with every available hand assisting in the repair. But the alien supervisors deliberately left Marcus to handle the situation alone. They seemed confident that he would fail, or at least struggle so much that his shortcomings would finally become obvious to everyone. Marcus did not panic. He was aware of the risks, but fear had little place in his mind. He relied instead on careful observation, logic, and years of experience to approach the malfunction systematically. While the alien supervisors watched from a distance, whispering among themselves, Marcus moved quickly yet deliberately, scanning the core, identifying the unstable conduits, and carefully correcting the flow. Before it could trigger a disaster, it was during these moments that Marcus's inattention grew. Handling the malfunction alone was stressful, but it also highlighted the alien supervisors' disregard for human capability. They had treated him as if he were weaker than them, expecting that their absence would guarantee failure. But Marcus's patience, endurance, and skill turned what they thought would be disaster into a success. The station was saved, the fuel core stabilized, and no systems were lost. Yet, despite his efforts, the supervisors immediately blamed him for the delay, twisting the outcome to fit their narrative. Marcus could feel the rising frustration inside him, a pressure that had been building over months of mistreatment, quietly storing itself like a coiled spring waiting to release. As days passed, the harassment intensified. Small incidents began to pile up. Marcus would arrive to find tools missing, systems tampered with, or schedules altered without explanation. The supervisors took credit for his successes and assigned blame for minor mistakes directly to him. Even when Marcus went above and beyond to fix complex problems, the aliens around him seemed to expect failure, waiting eagerly for a human to falter. Marcus noticed their behavior but did not retaliate. He had learned the value of restraint. He understood that anger could cloud judgment and that patience could be more powerful than immediate reaction. Still, the continuous pressure was like a storm slowly gathering strength on the horizon of his mind, invisible to others but growing in intensity. Beyond work, social interactions on the station also added to the tension. Some alien workers tried to provoke Marcus deliberately, testing how much ridicule he could endure. They made jokes about human limitations, questioned his decisions during routine procedures, and even mocked his species openly. Marcus remained outwardly calm, never showing the discomfort that often flustered other humans, but inwardly, he was cataloging every slight, every insult, every sign of disrespect. These details, small as they seemed, added to a growing awareness. The alien species on this station believed humans to be weak, and they were wrong. Marcus understood that endurance alone could be weaponized. By observing, learning, and silently preparing, he was building a reservoir of strength and insight that no one else on the station realized he possessed. During one critical incident, the station experienced a sudden power fluctuation in the primary energy grid. The lights flickered, alarms rang, and the machinery trembled under the strain. The alien supervisors panicked, arguing over which systems to stabilize first. Marcus, however, remained calm. He knew exactly what needed to be done. He assessed the grid, traced the erratic flows, and identified which components were failing. Working quickly and efficiently, he isolated the problem and restored stability. The crisis passed without incident, but the supervisors, as usual, claimed they had oversaw the recovery. Marcus did not argue. He had grown accustomed to being ignored or miscredited. Yet each event left him more aware of how wrong the aliens were about humans. Calm did not mean weak. Silence did not mean fear. Patience did not mean helplessness. Marcus understood these lessons deeply, and he began to feel a subtle shift within himself, the knowledge that he could endure, observe, and act in ways that others could not imagine. Despite the growing pressure, Marcus continued to learn from the station environment. He noticed how stress affected alien behavior, how pride led to mistakes, and how arrogance blinded even the most experienced workers. Each observation was stored in his mind for later use. He also began experimenting with subtle ways to prepare for future crises, checking backup systems more thoroughly, predicting potential failures, and anticipating human and alien reactions alike. Marcus knew that one day, the moment would come when patience alone would not suffice, when he would need to act decisively. He felt the first faint stirrings of that awareness, though he could not yet predict when it would reach its breaking point. The stress was not merely external. Marcus's internal world was beginning to change. Each day of mistreatment, each slight, each moment of being underestimated was like a layer of pressure building beneath his calm exterior. He could feel it quietly in his mind, like a slow-burning fire. He understood that patience had limits, and endurance could only hold so much before it transformed into something more potent. But Marcus also knew that he could not let the aliens sense any shift. If they believed they were pushing him, it would only make their mistake more rewarding later. His calm face, steady hands, and deliberate actions became a mask, hiding a mind preparing for a future moment of revelation. One evening, after a long day repairing a critical life support system, Marcus reflected on the months of harassment and challenges. He thought about how often humans had been underestimated, not just here, but across the galaxy. History was full of examples. Humans surviving disasters that aliens could not comprehend, adapting to conditions others found impossible. and enduring pressures far beyond expectation. Marcus felt that same resilience within himself, quietly growing, coiling like a spring beneath his calm exterior. He knew the aliens on the station were blind to it. They assumed his patience was weakness, his endurance was compliance, and his silence was fear. In truth, Marcus was learning a different truth. The human capacity for endurance could become unstoppable when tested to its extreme. Then came another incident that tested him further. During a routine inspection, Marcus discovered a potentially catastrophic error in the oxygen circulation system. The mistake was subtle, hidden, and had been overlooked by multiple alien engineers. The supervisors, busy assigning blame elsewhere, had ignored it. Marcus worked quickly, isolating the problem and preventing what could have been a deadly system failure. When the supervisors discovered the issue was resolved, they claimed credit again, while subtly insinuating that Marcus might have caused the problem in the first place. The injustice of it, the constant underestimation, the deliberate harassment stirred something deeper in Marcus. He remained outwardly calm, nodding and continuing his work, but inside, the tension was nearing a threshold he had never felt before. By now, the alien workers had begun to notice subtle changes in Marcus. His quiet observation was sharper, his movements more precise, and his focus almost unnervingly intense. Some whispered about how unusual it was for a human to endure so much without showing stress, but none of them understood what Marcus was truly preparing for. They did not realize that each insult, each impossible assignment, and each failure imposed by others was building a reservoir of mental and emotional power. The human they believed so fragile was quietly mastering the station's systems, understanding alien behavior, and preparing for a moment when patience would give way to action. As days turned into weeks, the cumulative effect of pressure, harassment, and responsibility was undeniable. Marcus felt the tension in his mind, like a spring compressing more tightly with each day. Yet he maintained his calm, continuing to solve impossible problems, repair dangerous machinery, and endure insults without complaint. He had reached a point where the calm exterior was no longer just a habit, it was a strategy. Every act of endurance, every moment of observation, and every successful repair strengthened him further, preparing him for a time when the accumulated pressure would transform into decisive action, an action that would show the aliens the strength they had never expected from a human. In this way, the days of rising conflict unfolded. Marcus Hale worked tirelessly, enduring harassment, solving crises, and observing every nuance of alien behavior. He carried the weight of unrecognized labor and quiet frustration, yet each challenge strengthened his resolve. What seemed like patience to the aliens was actually preparation. What seemed like silence was strategic observation. And what seemed like calm weakness was, in fact, a controlled energy building steadily toward a moment of transformation. The aliens had no idea how close that moment was, nor did they understand the human capacity for endurance and calculated response. But Marcus did, and with every passing day, he was readying himself for the inevitably a turning point that no one aboard the station would ever forget. Marcus Hale had been patient for months. Every insult, every impossible assignment, every failure imposed upon him by the alien supervisors had been absorbed, catalogued, and processed silently. He had endured more than most humans could imagine, and yet he remained calm on the surface. The other workers, alien and human alike, assumed that his patience was endless, that his quiet acceptance of hardship meant weakness. They could not have been more wrong. Within Marcus, a storm was quietly building, a storm that combined long-suppressed frustration, mental sharpness, and the instinctive power of a species forged through survival against unimaginable odds. It was on an ordinary day that the first true sign of change appeared. Marcus arrived at the station to begin his shift, only to discover that the supervisors had manipulated records yet again. Reports were falsified to show that a recent malfunction one Marcus had prevented was somehow his fault. The system readings, meticulously recorded and double-checked by Marcus, were altered to make it appear that he had been careless. To the alien supervisors, it was clever. They believed they could finally break him, that the human would crumble under the weight of false blame. But Marcus had long ago learned to observe and anticipate such moves. He saw the falsification immediately, not with anger but with cold clarity. The injustice of it lit a spark inside him, a spark that had been quietly smoldering for months. For the first time in memory, Marcus did not simply note the error and continue. He allowed himself a moment to feel the full weight of the deceit, the deliberate manipulation, and the years of constant underestimation, the frustration, the long history of being underestimated, and the awareness of the lies all converged inside his mind, forming a clear understanding the aliens had miscalculated. They believed patience and endurance meant submission. They believed humans could be controlled with insults, harassment, and false blame. But Marcus knew better. Calm did not mean compliance. Endurance did not mean weakness. Humans could wait, observe, and learn, and when the moment was right, they could act decisively with a force no one anticipated. That evening, a major system alert shattered the routine of the station. An explosion rocked the lower cargo bay, sending shockwaves through the corridors. Alarms screamed, lights flickered, and chaos erupted as alien workers scrambled to assess the damage. Many panicked, some fled from the danger, unsure how to react to the rapidly escalating crisis. The supervisors, naturally, assumed Marcus would be overwhelmed, or at least frozen by the chaos. They believed that a human, fragile and unprepared for stress, would either retreat or falter. They were wrong. Marcus moved toward the source of the explosion calmly, almost deliberately. He walked through smoke, heat, and noise with steady hands and a clear mind. He was not panicking. He was preparing. As he reached the lower cargo bay, Marcus assessed the damage. A power module, partially melted and dangerously unstable, hung precariously in the center of the room. The heat radiated off it, and the surrounding systems were on the verge of cascading failure. The alien supervisors were nowhere in sight, leaving him entirely responsible for the situation. Marcus's first instinct was to stabilize the module. He worked quickly but methodically, using every skill he had learned in years of engineering, repair, and crisis management. Sparks flew, metal hissed under the heat, and alarms continued to scream, but Marcus remained composed. Each movement was deliberate, precise, and calculated. He was not merely repairing the system, he was asserting control over a situation that no one else could manage. The other workers watched in stunned silence. They had always underestimated humans, and now they were witnessing something they had never seen before. A calm, methodical human acting with efficiency, intelligence, and confidence under extreme stress. Marcus did not shout. He did not panic. He did not even raise his voice. His calmness itself was almost terrifying, a stark contrast to the chaos around him. Every adjustment, every connection he repaired, and every control he manipulated demonstrated a level of skill and composure that defied the aliens' expectations. They began to realize, too late, that the human they had dismissed was far more capable than they had ever imagined. When the power module was finally stabilized, Marcus did not celebrate. He did not seek praise. The explosion had been dangerous, but it was no match for the human mind and hands that had managed it. Still, he knew the supervisors would attempt to twist the event to fit their narrative. They always did. But Marcus also knew something else. His calm and controlled response had shifted the perception of everyone watching. The moment had marked a turning point, not just for the immediate crisis, but for how he was viewed across the station. The aliens, for the first time, began to understand that their assumptions about humans had been flawed. Calmness, patience, and silence were not indicators of weakness. They could be preparation for moments of immense power and precision. After the explosion, Marcus began quietly planning his next steps. He reviewed the system logs, checking each reading for anomalies. He double-checked every repair, every control, and every safety protocol. In doing so, he discovered even more evidence of the supervisor's sabotage. Some systems had been deliberately neglected, cables misrouted, and safety checks ignored. The falsified records were part of a broader pattern designed to undermine him and, if possible, cause a serious accident. Marcus's frustration deepened, but it was now tempered with clarity and focus. He did not lash out in anger, because uncontrolled anger would be a mistake. Instead, he let the realization sharpen his mind that aliens believed they could manipulate him. Now, he understood the full extent of their recklessness and how vulnerable they themselves were to someone who had prepared for this moment. The turning point became more evident when Marcus confronted a small group of workers who had attempted to interfere with the repairs. They had assumed he would panic, that he would stop working, or that he would retreat, but Marcus, calm and steady, addressed them with a clarity and precision that startled even the most confident alien engineers. He explained the risks, outlined the proper steps to stabilize the systems, and corrected their mistakes without raising his voice. His presence and methodical approach commanded attention. No one dared argue. The realization was dawning. The human they had dismissed was fully capable of handling situations that would overwhelm even experienced aliens. Marcus had moved from passive endurance to active control, but he had done so quietly, deliberately, and without unnecessary force. His calm had become authority. Over the next several days, Marcus continued to investigate the supervisor's sabotage. He worked alone, tracing inconsistencies, analyzing logs, and uncovering deliberate attempts to create failure. Each discovery reinforced a truth he had long suspected. The aliens had underestimated him, and in doing so, they had exposed themselves to consequences they were not prepared for. Marcus did not seek revenge, but he began preparing strategies to prevent further manipulation. He set contingency plans, created backup protocols, and ensured that any future incidents could be managed with efficiency and minimal risk. This preparation marked a critical turning point in the story. Marcus was no longer simply enduring. He was taking proactive control, anticipating the next challenge before it could arise. The subtle changes in Marcus's behavior did not go unnoticed by the aliens. Some began to watch him more closely, trying to understand how he remained so composed under extreme pressure. Others whispered about his apparent invulnerability, his ability to manage dangerous systems alone, and the quiet intensity that had begun to radiate from him. For the first time, the alien supervisors appeared uncertain. They had assumed that their constant harassment and false accusations would eventually break him. and now they were seeing the opposite. Marcus was growing stronger, sharper, and more in control. Their authority, built on intimidation and manipulation, was quietly being undermined by the very human they had sought to dominate. It was during this period that Marcus made a critical mental shift. He recognized that patience and endurance had limits, and that those limits were approaching. The constant sabotage, harassment, and danger had brought him to a point where continued passive endurance would no longer suffice. He began to imagine the consequences of finally acting decisively, of using the knowledge he had accumulated to neutralize the manipulations and restore order. For the first time, he allowed himself to consider the impact of his own abilities on the station, the supervisors, and the alien workers. The calm he had maintained for months was about to transform into focused action, guided by intelligence, observation, and a long-suppressed determination to assert control. Then came the incident that truly marked the turning point. During a routine inspection of a critical oxygen filtration system, Marcus discovered that the supervisors had deliberately miswired a safety control, creating a potential life-threatening hazard. If left uncorrected, it could have caused suffocation or system-wide failure. Marcus realized that this was no longer about minor manipulations or false reports. It was a direct attempt to endanger lives and discredit him. He understood fully that the station and its crew were vulnerable not because of their own incompetence, but because of deliberate sabotage. In that moment, the simmering frustration within him transformed into a resolute clarity. He would no longer be merely the patient human. He would become the precise, decisive force needed to correct the situation and prevent further harm. Marcus worked quietly but with intensity, correcting the sabotage, stabilizing the system, and documenting every detail. He did not alert the supervisors, knowing that they would interfere or attempt to manipulate the outcome. Instead, he acted with calm authority, moving with deliberate precision through the dangerous system. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the atmosphere was tense, but Marcus remained unwavering. His focus was absolute, and his confidence radiated, even if only subtly. The other workers watched in awe, realizing that the human they had dismissed was now operating with a mastery and authority that no alien had anticipated. The turning point was complete. Marcus had moved from patient endurance to proactive control, from silent observation to decisive, intelligent action, and the station and its inhabitants would never view him the same way again by the end of these events. Marcus Hale had quietly demonstrated a critical truth. Patience, endurance, and calm were not signs of weakness. They were preparation. They were a shield that allowed him to observe, learn, and ultimately act with precision when the moment demanded it. The aliens who had assumed he would fail had misjudged him entirely. Marcus had reached the turning point, and with it came the awareness that the next stage, the moment when calm would give way to full decisive action, was approaching. The human who had endured so much was ready to reveal the true extent of his abilities, and the station would never be the same. Marcus Hale had reached the point where patience and endurance had transformed into quiet power. For months, he had absorbed insults, managed impossible tasks, and silently observed the alien supervisors' manipulations. Now, the moment had arrived where observation alone would no longer suffice. The constant harassment, deliberate sabotage, and reckless behavior of the aliens had escalated to a point where decisive action was the only solution. Marcus understood fully that the calm human they believed so fragile was about to reveal the true extent of what humans were capable of when pushed beyond limits. The station, the supervisors, and every alien worker around him were about to witness a transformation that no one could have anticipated. The first signs of the climax appeared subtly, almost imperceptibly. Marcus moved through the corridors with a deliberate calm that contrasted sharply with the panic spreading among the other workers. The alarms that rang across the station seemed distant to him. The flickering lights, the sparking panels, the tense atmosphere, they all barely registered. To the aliens, he appeared almost unnervingly composed, but every step he took, every adjustment he made, was calculated, precise, and intentional. Marcus had learned that chaos could be controlled not by shouting or force, but by quiet, methodical action. And now, the time had come to put that understanding into practice fully. The alien supervisors, naturally, were the first to sense that something was different. They expected the human to falter, to show hesitation, or to be overwhelmed by the growing series of crises. But Marcus did not hesitate. He began by assessing the state of the entire station with swift efficiency. Systems that were previously ignored or sabotaged were now inspected and repaired in rapid succession. Every error, every flaw, every manipulation by the supervisors was identified and corrected. The aliens tried to intervene, attempting to assert control over the unfolding actions, but Marcus anticipated their moves. He had been observing their patterns, their arrogance, and their impulsive tendencies for months. Every reaction they had was predictable, and he used that knowledge to stay always one step ahead. At one point, critical oxygen regulation system began to fail due to previous sabotage. The alarms screamed louder than ever, and the temperature in the lower decks began to fluctuate dangerously. The supervisors, panicking, demanded access to the system. believing they could regain control. Marcus did not yield. Instead, he worked calmly, shutting down conflicting circuits, rerouting power, and isolating the dangerous modules. Every movement was precise, almost surgical. Sparks flew, air hissed from venting pipes, and pressure alarms blared. The chaos around him intensified, but Marcus's focus remained unbroken. The aliens watching froze, unable to comprehend how a single human could manipulate multiple failing systems simultaneously, calmly and without error. The turning point of the climax was subtle but powerful. Marcus realized that controlling the machinery alone was not enough. He had to neutralize the supervisor's influence to prevent further sabotage. He moved methodically through the station, locking doors to isolate key areas, redirecting command signals, and systematically taking control of the communication networks. The supervisors attempted to resist, shouting commands and trying to override his actions, but Marcus anticipated every move. His calm authority over technology and logic forced the aliens into defensive positions. Every attempt to regain control was countered with precise action. In that moment, the balance of power shifted. The station was no longer under the supervisor's influence, it was under Marcus's. One of the supervisors, a particularly aggressive alien who had spent weeks mocking Marcus's fragility, confronted him directly. They assumed that intimidation would provoke an emotional reaction, that Marcus would shout or panic, and that the human would finally reveal weakness. Instead, Marcus faced the confrontation with cold clarity. His voice was low, steady, and unshakable. He did not argue. He did not shout. He stated facts, demonstrated the errors, and outlined the steps to neutralize further sabotage. The supervisor, expecting chaos and confusion, was stunned. Marcus's calm had become authority. It was not the loudness of his voice that commanded respect, but the absolute certainty of his actions and knowledge. Every alien present instinctively felt the shift. Humans were not fragile, and the one before them was not one to provoke. With the supervisors neutralized, Marcus continued to stabilize the station. He coordinated emergency repairs, ensuring that every system returned to optimal operation. Alarms gradually subsided, and the chaos of the previous hours began to diminish. But the true climax was not merely about fixing the station, it was about demonstrating the hidden power of human endurance and intelligence. The alien workers and supervisors now fully understood what patience, observation, and strategic thinking could accomplish. Marcus's calm was no longer mistaken for weakness. It was recognized as the controlled force of a mind that had been tested to its absolute limits and had emerged stronger. The climax reached its peak when Marcus confronted the supervisor's final attempts at sabotage. A secondary power core had been tampered with, designed to trigger a chain reaction that could cripple the station entirely. The supervisors, desperate to maintain authority, attempted to override Marcus's interventions, but he was ready. Years of observation, preparation, and experience allowed him to predict every move. He shut down the compromised systems, rerouted energy safely, and exposed the supervisors' tampering to the station's monitoring systems. Every alien present witnessed the outcome. The station remained stable. The sabotage was neutralized, and the human who had been underestimated for months had completely outmaneuvered the manipulators. The final moments of the climax were almost surreal. The station, once filled with chaos, confusion, and fear, now hummed with order, stability, and quiet efficiency. Marcus stood at the center of the control room, surrounded by systems he had restored and alien workers who could only stare in awe. The supervisors, defeated and exposed, had no choice but to accept the authority Marcus had quietly claimed. The humans' patience.com and endurance had culminated in decisive, unstoppable action. What had begun as silent observation and quiet resilience had transformed into a display of intelligence, skill, and controlled power that left everyone aboard the station profoundly aware of the human capacity for both endurance and decisive intervention. Every alien present understood something fundamental in that moment. The human species was far more resilient, capable, and dangerous than they had ever imagined. Marcus had not shouted, he had not lost his temper, and he had not acted recklessly. Yet in every deliberate move, every precise correction, and every calculated step, he demonstrated an overwhelming force that commanded respect, inspired awe, and instilled fear. The calm, patient human had become the controlling factor in the station's survival. The supervisors who had mocked him, harassed him, and underestimated him now realized the full consequences of their actions. They had pushed a human too far, and the result was not chaos, it was controlled, precise, and terrifying effectiveness. Even as the immediate crisis passed, Marcus's presence radiated authority. Every system he touched, every protocol he verified, every decision he made reinforced the truth that humans, when tested beyond endurance, could achieve results that others could not comprehend. The alien workers, who had once whispered about human fragility, now moved with quiet respect around him. The supervisors, once confident in their control, were humbled and cautious. Marcus had proven a fundamental lesson. Patience is not weakness. Calm is not submission. and endurance is not passivity. Humans have the capacity to observe, learn, and act with power that no one expects until the moment is forced. By the end of the climax, the station was fully stabilized. Systems that were previously compromised were secure, and future sabotage attempts were neutralized before they could take effect. The alien workers, though shaken, had witnessed firsthand the transformation of a patient, enduring human into a decisive, unstoppable force. Marcus did not gloat, he did not seek revenge or personal recognition. Instead, he maintained his calm, methodically checking systems and ensuring that nothing had been overlooked. His actions, precise and deliberate, were a demonstration of mastery rather than emotion. This final act cemented his authority and made it clear that humans were not to be underestimated. The climax of Marcus Hale's story was not merely the resolution of a technical crisis, it was the revelation of a fundamental truth about human nature. The calm and patient exterior, long mistaken for weakness by the aliens, was in fact a reservoir of intelligence, endurance, and strategic potential. When pushed to the edge, Marcus had demonstrated that humans could not only survive extreme pressure but could also act decisively, with precision, and with a force that left others in awe. The station, once chaotic and uncertain, now stood as a testament to the power of observation, patience, and controlled action. By the time Marcus completed his work, the atmosphere on the station had changed completely. The alien workers moved with newfound respect, the supervisors were cautious and subdued, and the quiet authority of a single human had reshaped the dynamics of the entire station. No one would forget the day Marcus Hale, the human who had endured months of harassment and sabotage, calmly and methodically took control, neutralized threats, and ensured the survival of everyone aboard. The climax was complete, and it marked the moment when patience, observation, and endurance became unstoppable action. After the intense events that had shaken the station to its core, Marcus Hale finally allowed himself a moment to breathe. The alarms had faded, the power cores were stabilized, and the sabotage that had threatened the lives of everyone on board had been fully neutralized. The station hummed steadily once again, systems operating with flawless precision. The alien supervisors, who had spent months mocking, belittling, and sabotaging him, were now subdued, cautious, and wary. The other alien workers, who had once whispered about human fragility, now observed Marcus with a mixture of awe, respect, and quiet apprehension. Marcus had not sought recognition, but the impact of his actions was undeniable. He had transformed the station's chaos into order and demonstrated in the most undeniable way the hidden power of a patient human under pressure. Marcus walked through the corridors of the station slowly, deliberately, observing the results of his work. Every system he touched had been checked, every control carefully monitored, and every potential point of failure corrected. The alien workers moved aside as he passed, not out of fear but out of respect. They understood now that the human they had underestimated was not only capable of surviving extreme conditions, but also of asserting control in ways they could not have imagined. Marcus's calm demeanor remained, but beneath it lay a profound awareness of the shift that had taken place. The station's hierarchy had been quietly redefined. Authority no longer resided solely with the supervisors. It now existed in a space defined by competence, endurance, and intelligence, qualities Marcus possessed in abundance. The alien supervisors, humiliated by the exposure of their sabotage, were summoned to the station's command center to explain their actions. Marcus accompanied them, though not as a participant in the interrogation but as the person whose work had revealed the truth. The station's board reviewed the logs, the system recordings, and the evidence of manipulation. Every act of sabotage, every falsified report, and every attempt to undermine Marcus was clearly documented. The supervisors could not deny the facts, and for the first time, they faced the consequences of underestimating a human. The board removed them from authority positions, their reputation damaged beyond repair. Marcus did not celebrate their downfall. His satisfaction came not from revenge but from justice, from the restoration of order, and from the acknowledgement that competence, not position or intimidation, determined true authority. The alien workers began to speak differently of Marcus. Where once they whispered about human fragility, they now recounted the events with reverence. Stories spread quickly throughout the station. The calm human who had endured months of harassment observed every manipulation, and then, at the decisive moment, acted with precision, intelligence, and authority to save the station. Marcus's name became synonymous with quiet power, patience, and calculated action. His presence alone was enough to command respect and ensure that systems were maintained with diligence. Even the youngest, least experienced workers now looked to him for guidance, recognizing that his calm and methodical approach was unmatched. Despite the accolades and growing respect, Marcus remained as quiet and composed as ever. He did not boast or seek recognition. To him, the events were not about personal glory but about fulfilling responsibility. He had ensured the safety of everyone on the station, corrected the errors that had been deliberately introduced, and restored the order that had been disrupted. The transformation, however, was not just external. it had also affected him personally. He now carried the confidence of a human who had faced both subtle and overt challenges, endured months of pressure and manipulation, and emerged fully capable of managing crises that had overwhelmed others. His calm had proven itself not just as a coping mechanism, but as a powerful strategy. Marcus also began quietly, mentoring the alien workers in ways that subtly reshaped the culture of the station. He taught them methods for systematic observation, careful analysis, and patient problem-solving. He demonstrated that careful planning, combined with decisive action, could prevent disasters before they occurred. He showed that endurance was not passive weakness but a resource to be harnessed, a foundation for skill, intelligence, and ultimately, authority. The alien workers, once dismissive and mocking, began to adopt these practices themselves, not out of obligation but because they recognized their effectiveness. Marcus's influence spread quietly but steadily, shaping the operational culture of the station in ways that would have lasting effects. The supervisors, now removed from power, were treated with caution. Some attempted to reclaim authority or manipulate situations to their advantage, but Marcus's vigilance combined with the documented evidence of their past actions left them unable to regain influence. The station's board had learned a crucial lesson. Human patience and calm should never be mistaken for weakness, and intelligence combined with endurance could surpass even years of assumed experience or authority. Marcus's actions had rewritten the understanding of human potential for everyone aboard the station, establishing a precedent that would influence future interactions between humans and alien species in the sector. In the quiet aftermath of the crisis, Marcus spent time reflecting on the months leading up to the climax. He considered the subtle provocations, the deliberate sabotage, and the constant underestimation that had been directed toward him. Each insult, each task, each attempt to undermine his work had been a test, whether intentional or not. Marcus realized that every challenge had strengthened him, had sharpened his mind, and had prepared him for the decisive actions that ultimately stabilized the station. He understood that endurance, observation, and calm were not passive traits. They were tools that, when properly applied, could change outcomes in profound ways. The calm human, long dismissed as fragile, had proven to be an unstoppable force when the moment demanded it. News of Marcus's actions spread beyond the station. Other colonies and nearby outposts heard of the human who had remained calm under prolonged harassment, who had observed, analyzed, and then acted with precision to prevent disaster. Marcus became a symbol of human resilience, patience, and intelligence. He inspired admiration and caution, respect and fear, in equal measure. Wherever humans were rare and underestimated, stories of Marcus's actions reminded others that patience could conceal immense capability, and that calm should never be mistaken for weakness. The narrative shifted. Humans were no longer merely adaptable observers, they were strategic actors capable of decisive, effective intervention in extreme circumstances. Marcus continued his work quietly, restoring full operational efficiency to the station. He inspected systems, fine-tuned machinery, and monitored the work of others to ensure continued safety. He remained calm, deliberate, and precise, but there was a subtle difference in the energy around him. The alien workers, once skeptical, now deferred to his expertise. Their whispers of disbelief had transformed into respect. The supervisors, humbled and wary, were cautious in their interactions. Marcus's authority was no longer enforced by position alone. It was earned through action, observation, and the controlled demonstration of skill under pressure. His calm had become a benchmark, a model for how patience combined with decisiveness could achieve results that others could not even imagine. As the weeks passed, Marcus also began to cultivate a culture of accountability. He documented protocols, created redundancy measures, and trained workers in strategies for observing, anticipating, and correcting errors before they became crises. He encouraged others to value careful thought over impulsive reaction, to trust patience as a tool, and to recognize that endurance was a source of strength. With the station, once chaotic and fractured under the supervisor's vicious manipulations, became a model of efficiency, stability, and collaboration. Marcus's influence extended far beyond the technical repairs. He had reshaped the operational and social dynamics of the station itself, leaving a legacy that would endure long after the immediate crisis had passed. Despite all the changes, Marcus remained humble. He did not seek personal recognition or reward. His satisfaction came from knowing that the station was safe, that the alien workers had learned from the experience, and that the supervisor's manipulations had been exposed and corrected. He had turned months of frustration, harassment, and underestimation into a demonstration of skill, patience, and controlled power. The calm human had proven that endurance was not weakness, that observation was not passivity, and that strategic action could achieve results far beyond what others expected. Marcus had reshaped perceptions, rewritten expectations, and established a new understanding of what it meant to be human in a complex, challenging, and often hostile environment. By the end of this period, the station was fully operational, its workers efficient and aware, and its supervisors humbled and cautious. Marcus Hale had quietly ensured the stability, safety, and integrity of the station while demonstrating, in the most undeniable way, the hidden power of a patient human who had finally acted decisively. The alien workers understood that calmness was not a sign of weakness. Patience was not submission, and endurance was not helplessness. Humans, when underestimated, could observe, learn, and act with precision, intelligence, and unstoppable efficiency. Marcus had become more than an engineer. He had become a symbol, a benchmark, and a reminder that the most dangerous force was often the one quietly observing, patiently enduring, and finally acting with decisive clarity, even in the aftermath. Marcus's influence continued to grow. Other humans in the sector, rare as they were, began to receive recognition for skills, patience, and observation that had previously been overlooked. Stories of his actions circulated widely, shaping the way alien species approached and interacted with humans. Where once they assumed fragility, they now assumed competence, careful calculation, and the possibility of decisive, unstoppable action when patience was pushed to its limits. Marcus's calm, his endurance, and his strategic intervention had not only stabilized the station but had altered perceptions of an entire species. The legacy of that turning point would continue to influence interactions, behavior, and expectations far beyond the immediate station. In the end, Marcus did not change. He remained the same quiet, methodical human he had always been. But the world around him had shifted. Respect replaced dismissal, caution replaced arrogance, and recognition replaced underestimation. The station thrived, systems operated flawlessly, and the alien workers had a new understanding of the strength of human endurance and the quiet power of calm. Marcus Hale had not sought glory, but he had earned it nonetheless. His patience, intelligence, and precise action had proven that humans, often underestimated, were forces to be reckoned with. The calm exterior of a human could hide resilience, the skill and strategic brilliance that, when revealed, left everyone around with a profound understanding. Never underestimate the quiet ones, for their patience may hide the most unstoppable force. The resolution was complete, not with fanfare or celebration but with quiet acknowledgement and deep respect. Marcus returned to his work, as he always had, methodical, careful, and composed. The station was safe. The alien supervisors were humbled. The workers were aware, competent, and respectful. And somewhere deep inside, Marcus knew that the true power of patience, observation, and strategic action had been fully realized. He had endured, he had observed, and finally, he had acted. The human who had been underestimated had become a force that no one aboard the station nor beyond could ever forget.